Hello, Liz. How are you today?
Hello, Tony. I'm fine, thank you very much.
Good.
Back in the office with our real virtual background. So
that looks fab. I'm very jealous. I've got a wooden wall, but apart from that, it's all good. Listen, thank you very much for agreeing. I know you're busy. Thank you very much for agreeing to be on this Teams call with me. I just wanted to do a little bit of a Q&A session, but before then, I want to introduce you to the audience who may not have met you before. So could you just explain your role and who you are, please?
Certainly. So I'm Liz Barron-Majerik, often known just as Liz at Lantra for ease. And I'm the Scotland director for Lantra. So Lantra is a charity that exists to help make sure that our land-based and aquaculture sector can meet their skills needs. And to this end, I also sit on a number of skills groups, including the Scottish Forestry Skills Group and the English Forestry Skills Forum, which I also chair. Fantastic,
fantastic. So as Learning and Development Manager for BSW Group and a STEM Forestry Ambassador myself, I often get asked by people about how people get into roles within forestry, and whether as a young person, as an older person, or as a student, how you would enter the forestry environment. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to highlight some of the things taking place, because there's loads going on around us that people might not have heard about, that we could discuss and promote, which promotes the sector and forest roles. So let's discuss how you feel, what we feel the biggest concerns in the forestry sector, in terms of getting people into the forestry sector, in terms of all ages and all groups and all types of people. So what do you feel in your role is the biggest issues we face now in moving people forward regarding the forestry sector and getting people into jobs?
Well, I think sometimes, in some ways, the biggest issue is also the success story, which is that the sector is growing, and more it's being viewed as a good thing, which is great. Yes. But I think there's still quite a lot of challenges around a lack of understanding about what working in forestry actually means and what it involves, which in turn has, I think, led to us not perhaps having enough new entrants and graduates and trainees coming into the sector. I think some people still believe that if you just leave the ground for long enough, you get a forest. And I suppose that whilst you might get some trees growing eventually, it is, of course, a bit more complicated than that. And that's why we need more people choosing to study forestry and to work within the sector. And I think also we sometimes undersell the skills that are required for working within forestry. It's slightly undersold. Maybe we need to focus a bit more on the transferable skills that our entrants have as well, and the technical ability that they have, whether it's a chainsaw operator going to the sites that a harvester couldn't get to, or a harvester themselves being so efficient with the timber that they're producing with minimal environmental impact, or a specialist silvicultural expert. I think there's also a bit of a flip side as well to forestry being so closely linked to the green recovery and being known as such more and more, which has led to there being a bit of an aversion to cutting any tree down, regardless of the benefits, the obvious benefits of locking up that carbon in timber housing, for example, which then leads to some NIMBYism, I suppose, if that's the term, around felling, which runs the risk of our green transition leading to more deforestation in nations that perhaps don't have the good forestry standards that we have regarding felling and replanting. It can also mean that some people come into forestry not expecting any trees to be felled. And of course, that's both unrealistic and not good if we're to transition to the net zero economy, as the alternatives to wood and timber are so much worse for our carbon footprint. And I think all of that together means that perhaps we're not quite attracting enough people to the sector.
No, good. Yes, yeah, I agree. But how do we know this, Liz?
So there has been research undertaken both in Scotland and in more recently in England and Wales, which you can find on the Lantra Forestry Skills Forum pages. The results of the latter in particular were very positive in that they showed an optimistic outlook for the growth of the sector and at the individual business level, but a lack of confidence perhaps in the training and skills provision that was available. So as a result, a number of companies have set up their own internal bespoke training programs, while some smaller businesses that are offering more of the ad hoc. I think though that there's a bit more of a review required for the wider structural and training educational needs, which until that's happened is also going to limit the number of new trained entrants coming forward, particularly south of the border.
Okay, so where are we seeing the biggest issues currently, Liz?
Well, from the research results, there was certainly a need expressed for more robust training of focused forestry skills, so whether that's practical or managerial, producing better operators on the ground, better silviculturalists, and more business-focused new entrants and employees. And that's across all the devolved nations. And unfortunately, of course, the training provision isn't always where the greatest need is, and that makes it particularly challenging when it's practical skills that are required.
Okay, you spoke a little minute ago about the consequences. What are the consequences of us not doing anything at this point?
Well, without the new entrants that we need, we're not going to be able to sustain our growth or meet our tree planting targets. And the consequences of a failure to meet that are, of course, hugely significant, both for the economy, for the communities that depend on that work as well, and of course for the climate. We also run the risk of losing the training provision that we have left, which of course will be devastating for the sector and very, very difficult to recover from. So it is a very significant challenge that we're facing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it is certainly clear from what you've said that we need people to have access to forestry careers and to be able to train as part of this industry going forward. At what age level should we be employing this new training and awareness of job roles in the forestry sector?
Well, we obviously need people now, which suggests that we should focus on our school leaver age and people who are looking to change careers. But I don't think we can lose sight of the importance of engaging with all ages and from all backgrounds, because support for the work that forestry is doing is just so important.
So what do you feel our educational facilities doing to help promote this?
A wide range of organisations have been involved, certainly, and I've been seeing more schools delivering learning outdoors, particularly as we move into the next normal, which of course is the best place for all education to be delivered. And there are some fantastic groups helping to support such work. There's the OWLS groups in Scotland, the Outdoor Woodland Learning groups, the RFS, Learning Through Landscapes, and of course the Forestry, if I may just refer collectively to the organisations with all the devolved titles, is also doing great work, and yourselves, for example, with the apprentices and becoming ambassadors for the sector. The remaining training providers and colleges across the whole of the UK obviously do what they can as well, but it's hard when you're flat out delivering training, particularly with so much extra practical delivery being required after the pandemic. So the more the sector can do to support this, the better.
Fantastic, fantastic. In terms of inclusion and diversity, what types of things are we doing to promote these types of areas within the sector?
So there were some Women in Wellies events, which are fantastic. There's lots of school pupils and positive speakers presenting on their work and how they got into the sector. That's been great. There's been the Women in I Look Like a Forester events as well, and they've been fantastic. There was the Women in Rural Economies Practical Training Fund that the Scottish Government supported, which we administered. Many applicants for that fund were from the forestry side, so chainsaw training, management training, a wide variety of different courses were delivered there as well. And we've been working with a number of groups with established links within the sector, because it's very important to work directly with them. So organisations like Backbone, for example, and we're working to try and increase the number of instructors as well from a more diverse range of backgrounds.
Fantastic. That sounds really, really positive. That's great to hear. I know that in the Scottish Borders, Till Hill in particular, have been working closely with Borders College and on a kind of foundation forestry training course for year 5 and 6 to allow young people the opportunity to have some hands-on experience and some courses on forestry, which link into their final year at college and at school, and then link into their college facilities. We offer this through Till Hill, and a lot of our Till Hill members of staff have been part of that process. What's your feeling about that? Do you think that's a good way forward, or should more companies be doing this type of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think meaningful work experience is so important in building the the kind of credible career pathways where somebody can have a taster and see, yeah, I could see myself doing this, and I can achieve this, which also helps them to focus on their studies as well, so they can get to that point. So it's good for the schools too. Foundation apprenticeships, for example, offer a really wide variety of opportunities for the young person, and it's not always specifically within the practical sector. So the foundation in business is a great way to get new blood into the office, and sometimes when they see what the business is doing, they're actually more keen to go down that practical route as well. So it gives young people a taste for that role, and it allows them to check that's definitely what they want to do before they spend 4 years studying and training in order to get into it. But it's also good for the business as well. It might seem like a bit of a hassle at first, trying to get through the health and safety aspects and all the kind of paperwork and supervising and doing a bit of training, but actually it's a great way to access new talent before anybody else does, and to really help to kind of shape that new employee. And also they help to reinvigorate the workplace. They bring new ideas, and they do have a different approach as well, which can also help to kind of fire up the rest of the workforce too. So highly recommend that.
Good. I totally agree with you. I think it's a great way forward, and all those points I'm ticked on the box to say yes, I agree totally with you. So what do you feel businesses should offer in terms of awareness and access to training if we were to do more?
I think every business should be encouraging their staff to view every day as a learning day. I know I do, and I know my team feels the same, but sometimes that learning might be around technical skills and tickets required for a job, but sometimes it's the slightly ironically entitled softer skills, which are often much harder to develop and to learn effectively. Things like effective communication, strategic business skills, appreciation of the opportunities of a diverse workforce and what that brings to innovation and development. All of those will help the business as well as the sector.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, but one of the things that we've been working on recently is our work with Kilfassie College down in Wales and the Till Hill Timber Diploma course, which allows young people to train all the way through different levels within that course, right the way up to a diploma level, and hopefully from 2022 to degree level as well. Our fingers are crossed on that one, that we will be able to bring some of those students in as graduates in the near future. Do you think the mix of business and higher education or further education is a good one in terms of training as well?
No, absolutely. I think one of the advantages that we had when I was back at the Forestry School up in Inverness was that we could deliver everything in the one place. So progression to the next level, when one was complete, it wasn't so scary for them because they already knew the place, they knew most of the staff as well. And I think the FEHE line is really just a funding term. You know, it's just the next level and the next level of skills. So I think if we really want lifelong learning, those paths, that kind of familiarity can really help for that progression to be continued. I think clear routes though, so it's important that when new training is developed that we can level that and make sure that we know where people are coming in at so that they can maybe progress to the right level. I'm afraid that at the moment FE delivery south of the border is really stretched, and I think more support for that the better. And certainly the results of the research that we commissioned emphasised that the innovative approaches were definitely going to be required in the future. So it's good to hear those kind of initiatives coming forward.
I totally agree. I think every day is a learning day, and it is important not to stand still. Often it's difficult to imagine and introduce new innovative ideas and approaches, but I suppose things like AI and VR might be a really good way forward and moving forward and giving people opportunities in a wider areas to networks to work in a safe environment under this kind of virtual reality type process. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. VR is a great way for attracting kids. If you've got a careers fair, as soon as you've got that headset out, you've got a queue. You know, so that's a great way of getting people over to speak to you. And I think it's very likely it'll be used to control machinery more in future as well. But I think it's still better for everybody to be in a forest, you know, as part of that engagement. So trying to get schools more out to forest activities as well, brownies, scouts, everybody, trying to make sure that we're working with those young people to have the real life experience as well of access to some of the virtual ones. You mentioned data too, and I think that certainly the increased data that's going to be available from the machines that are working, the drones, that really starts to kind of indicate that AI would be helpful in terms of interpreting all that data. Though at the moment, again, it's still attempted intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. And I don't think there's really a substitute from learning from a real expert at the moment, though that can, of course, be virtual. And it was heartening to hear recently that in another meeting that the ICF, for example, all of their training has increased, or access to their training has increased through the kind of delivery in the virtual format. The Forestry School offers a professional development award in forestry that can be undertaken distance learning, and I know that many other providers are now offering distance learning as a route as well. Of course, face-to-face practical training is still required, and I know that very many of the forestry trainers across the country are booked up till December and beyond in some cases. So we certainly need more people doing training in a variety of different ways, but we also need more trainers as well, particularly on some of the new technologies.
Absolutely. I think the backlog after COVID has created this sort of lump of people needing still to get trained up until, well, you say until Christmas, they're all booked up already. And yeah, great. Okay, so Liz, you and I are both members of the Scottish Forestry and Timber Technology Skills Group. And at our last meeting, I was actually blown away, astounded to hear the number of initiatives taking place to get people into this sector. Just off the top of your head, could you just highlight some of these few that you've been involved in recently?
Okay, there's been a lot, as you say, it's been very busy. I think the initiatives to increase the number of CPD courses available, I think that's been a great success, particularly virtually, although we planned for that at the time. There's also, we've been working with Ringlink to create a new kind of guide for people who are thinking about taking on a young person and being a mentor, so that's available as well. There's now the FMO, the John Deere FMO simulators that are now both in Barony and the School of Forestry up in Inverness. And of course, we've created the Forestry Induction Pack with hard copy ready. Yay. So that's now available as well as a kind of support pack for people who are just coming into forestry, with a one-stop shop where all the different contacts are and the different information that they need. I think originally it was only supposed to be 8 pages, as you can see. There's obviously quite a lot they need to know when they come into forestry, and so that kind of grew, but that was developed with the Skills Forum and everybody contributed to that as well. So it is very much a kind of team product. It's not just Lantra that produced that. And I think as well, the design of it too has made it really engaging, rather than just a textbook full of text that they have to memorise, to the extent that it's actually been shortlisted for an award as well, a design award, which is fabulous. And all that common for a forestry publication, I don't think.
Fantastic, that's great news, and a useful bit of kit. It's always nice to have something tangible, I think, in your hands that you can look at and put down, as well as having things online as well. Okay, so again, another thing that we're both involved in, Liz, is that we're both STEM ambassadors, and particular forestry ambassadors. I know that we have STEM ambassadors in Till Hill and the BSW Timber Group. Can you give me some exciting news of any upcoming events that are taking place in the STEM sector?
Yeah, well, there are some new projects that I can't give too much information on yet, but rest assured there's going to be some great opportunities to engage with schools as part of a bigger team of ambassadors. So stay tuned for news on that project with SCDI that I know Comfor has been engaged with, and another opportunity that's going to be available later on this year as well.
Fantastic. So if there are any viewers watching that wish to become a STEM ambassador, specifically for forestry, how might they sign up to that?
Okay, yep, I've got a wee guide, if I can just share my screen. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes, that looks great. So that's your process for registering online and becoming a STEM ambassador in forestry.
Indeed, and the STEM network is of course across the whole of the UK as well, so it doesn't really matter where you're based. You just go to register. On the profile, you need to register though on the Forestry Ambassador scheme. And the reason we've set this up is so that if you're a teacher and you're looking for somebody specifically within forestry, you can search within the scheme rather than it depending on forestry being in your employer title, for example. Yeah. And that's under the skills and qualifications tab. We also would like you to tick the box to share your details, if that's okay, because then that means that if we have to try and identify where we might want to increase the number of STEM ambassadors, because or forestry STEM ambassadors, because there might be only one covering 25 different schools, then it allows us to do that as well. So we can see how many forestry ambassadors there are and some of the number of activities that they've been delivering to. What you want to do once you're registered and you'll be connected with a local hub that will tell you more about what to expect, what some of the resources will be, and then it will essentially take you through the whole process of disclosure checking, which will make it safer for you to work with schools, etc. And then you just kind of sign up, and then you'll be searchable. And it's not just schools as well, it can also be youth groups. So brownies and guides and scouts, they all link in with the STEM Ambassador Hub as well.
That's fantastic, Liz. Thank you very much for that. And fingers crossed, anybody who's watching, who's interested, please do get in touch. And if you need more information, get in touch with me in learning development, and I can help you get onto that scheme. Thank you. So Liz, we've had a very quick chat there, but heard so many different things that are going on. We've talked about so many amazing initiatives taking place across the country and highlighted some fantastic opportunities being delivered for people in all walks of life. It's becoming much more diverse now to become part of this forest industry. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to working closely with you in future events and promotions for our industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.